Can we hear it again for the teacher, please? Yeah. I was a teacher for 10 years. Now I work in advertising. Good. All right. So I went from helping people to hurting people. So there we go. Okay. So a couple of years ago, I was at my dad's house, and he's cooking dinner. And it's going to take a little while for dinner to actually be edible. So I bumble off into his library, because my dad has a house big enough to have a library. And I bumble around, and I'm looking at his books, his bookshelves. And I'm really looking for a book to steal, because my dad and I steal from each other constantly. It's this weird thing that we do. He steals mainly from me, I steal from him, and I steal from other people just for fun. Nothing major, but the people who I almost bummed cigarettes from outside will attest to that, and I'll see you guys later. And from the other people who, when you were buying cigarettes, who gave me a cigarette, thank you very much. I'll hit them up later. But I steal from like coworkers and things like that. Nothing major. You know, I stole like the batteries out of their mouse, shit like that. I'm a sociopath. You live with me. You know that. So, well then, she lives with me. I'm a sociopath. She knows that. And so like I've stolen glasses from restaurants. I've stolen glasses from here. Sorry guys. So I'm like bumbling around looking at his bookshelves, and I'm looking for like a book basically to steal to piss off my father. And as I'm looking around, I come across a book whose title and whose author really capture my attention. The name of the book was The Way Things Ought to Be. And the author of this book is Rush Limbaugh. And this story is agnostic of political affiliation. Like Rush Limbaugh, regardless of your political affiliation, is one of the worst creatures ever shat into existence. We can all agree on this. Regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum, he exists he dwells in a world beneath humanity. And I think we can all agree on that. So I'm looking at this book, and I'm like, Rush Limbaugh? Like, my dad's not political. My dad's a doctor. He doesn't give a shit about anybody who isn't this close to death. Right? And so, like, I go and I investigate. I've got to know more about this. So I pull the book off the shelf, and I open it up, and inside on like the blank page is an inscription in a hand that I have not seen in many years. And it reads, "My love, here is to a vast and wonderful future that should have been all along. Claire, 1993. My mom died. My mom died years ago. She died when I was 16 years old. And she had cancer. It's okay, guys. It doesn't have to be that quiet. It's okay. She had been sick for a number of years, and she died the cancer way. So for a number of years, she was fine. She was seemingly healthy. And then in the last year, her cancer just gobbled her up, and then she was gone. And I said I was 16 when she died. And so at that age, to have any loved one die when you are 16 years old, it arrests your understanding of who that person is at that age. And their presence ceases to be a presence and becomes an equally present absence. You know what I mean? It's like suddenly you must interact with the absence of that person. And I've spoken of this to other people before, and you develop a relationship with that absence, and you have to then kind of excavate whatever they leave behind. And so their journals or the stories of their behavior that are relayed to you from other people, they're what you use to kind of assemble an idea of who that person was. As I got older, I grew to understand who my dad was as an adult. I watched my dad go from a dad to a guy and to a man, and I was able to. I'm gonna go over. I was able to. I can't. 4 minutes already, Jesus. I was able to understand who my dad was and like digest those things that I had observed. But with my mom, she was still perfect as this image of my mom. And so to see this book that she had inscribed and given to my dad, it was it absolutely shook my notion of who she was. Because my mother was not a neoconservative. My mom was this sweet, she's like a living hug. Like, she walked around, she loved everybody. She opened 3 businesses and tanked all of them because she wanted nothing more than to be nice to everybody, which is literally the opposite of a neoconservative, right? And so I see this thing, and I'm like, I got to figure this out. And so I take the book with me. I steal it, but not for fun, but really for research. And I go and I read this book constantly. I read it cover to cover, over and over again. And anyone who's ever had any postgraduate experience, you know that research sucks. But when the footnotes are your dead mother, like, that's really rough research. And so I read this book over and over again. Like, I read it at red lights, and finally, like months later, I end up at my dad's house again, and I've got the book in my bag. And I sit down, and my dad, who's making dinner again, he looks over, and he sees the book in my bag, and he walks over, and he's like, "What the hell are you, Rush Limbaugh? What are you doing with a book by this asshole?" And he pulls it out, and he doesn't recognize that it was the book that my mom gave him. And he opens it up, and he sees the inscription. And suddenly, all the air leaves the room, and he looks at me, and he fixes me in this really kind of tragic gaze. And he says, "Andrew, what do you think she meant by this?" And I said, "I don't know. I've been reading it over and over again to try and understand what she meant by this." And he says, "Well, in 1993, we paid off a lot of our debts, and like we were going to have the life that we were always supposed to have. And when you get married," and he goes into this whole big story. And I'm like, "Yeah, but that doesn't explain why she chose that book to give you." Like, and I realized that what my dad's trying to do is he's trying to spare me what is perhaps the reality of my mom, because he knows her in a way that I wouldn't get to. I'm never going to get to know my mom. I'm never going to get to know if she bought that book for him, ironically, right? Like, just get a load of this asshole. Like, I'm never going to know. And instead, what I'm left with is the option of creating a story of who my mother is. And the story I choose to believe about my mother is that a couple of years ago, she was standing in a bookstore, and it's running late. She's got to get home and make dinner for her 13-year-old son, who's going to tell her all about a girl who doesn't like him, and her husband, who's a doctor and comes home exhausted. And she's frustrated because she's got a business meeting that she's got to get to. And she looks and she sees Rush Limbaugh's miserable, chubby, porcine face. He's awful. He's the worst. And she opens the book and she looks at it. And she says, "Rush, you're going to come with me." And she closes the book, and she drops it in her bag, and she shoplifts the fucking thing. Thank you.